Hi friends, and welcome to the first video in my fall series. I'm showing you 5 methods to transform Dollar Tree Styrofoam pumpkins into beautiful farmhouse fall decor. I hope you enjoy. Let's get started. For this project, I'm using one of Dollar Tree's smaller pumpkins, and I'll remove all of the embellishments from the top. I'm going to give this one base coat of white chalk paint because I'm going to be covering this with a napkin. So it depends on the color of your napkin as to what base coat you should paint your pumpkin. I found these gorgeous napkins at Hobby Lobby when they had their 40% off sale. Because this is a smaller pumpkin, I'm going to cut it in half. This is a 2-ply napkin, but they were attached really well, so I was able to apply both of the plies to the pumpkin itself. I held it up in place to see how much I needed to cut off of the top, but save that piece because we'll be using that later on in the project. Using a wet, damp paintbrush, I'm going to apply a thin coat of Mod Podge to one section of the pumpkin from the top to the bottom. Then I can apply the napkin and push it down into the grooves of the pumpkin itself, and then very gently go over the top of the napkin to push everything down. You don't want to apply too much pressure and tear the napkin. I'm going to make sure that I push the top part of the napkin down to the top part of the pumpkin, and then when I get to the next section, carefully peel back the napkin, apply more Mod Podge, and then gently press that down with the paintbrush on top of the napkin, making sure to get in between all of the grooves. I'll continue to do that until I have completely attached the napkin to the pumpkin, and mine had a small space where the napkin wasn't quite long enough, so I'm going to take that piece that I cut off in the beginning and line the design up with the sides and then apply that with the Mod Podge. I'm going to wrap it down to the bottom, and then I can cut the excess off and use that excess piece to cover the other piece on the bottom of the pumpkin. Once you're finished, your pumpkin should have a thin layer of Mod Podge now on the outside of the napkin as well. So thoroughly let that dry for several hours, and then we can add our stem to the top. So once it dried, it is just an absolutely gorgeous piece, and most of the wrinkles will be removed, but if there are a few, that gives it so much more character and makes it look like it's almost wrapped in fabric. So I just took a branch from my yard and used my miter shears to cut a small piece off to attach in the center at the top for our stem, and then I'm going to create a messy bow using some jute rope. So I left enough for a tail and then wrap that around about 4 or 5 times. Then I'll take a piece of the same jute rope and tie it right in the center of the loops that were wrapped around my fingers. And then I could cut the excess from the string that I just tied in the center off, and I'll be able to hot glue this to the stem of the pumpkin. I love how this pumpkin turned out, and you can find so many beautiful napkins at Dollar Tree, Dollar General, and of course Hobby Lobby when they have them on sale. You guys let me know what you think of project number 1. Project number 2, we're using one of Dollar Tree's larger carvable pumpkins and remove the stem from the top. I'm going to use a utility knife and cut about a 1.5-inch hole at the top. And then I'm going to take some white chalk paint and give this one base coat. Again, it depends on the color fabric because we're going to be covering this one with fabric. So that will determine the base coat color that you need to paint your pumpkin. I'm using this fabric piece from Dollar Tree. It is absolutely gorgeous with these sunflowers on it. I'm going to set the pumpkin on there and then fold the fabric over to about the center way of the carved section. And then I'll pull the other side up and know exactly how much of this fabric I need to cut off of this side. Once I have that cut down, I can do the exact same thing on the other 2 sides, so I'll know if I need to cut any off. And in this particular case, I didn't need to cut any off. So I'm going to tuck that side in really tightly, then pull the other side really tight and tuck that into the section that we carved out. Then starting on one side that I just pulled in, I'm going to create a pleat and tuck that down and continue to create pleats as I go around and get that section of fabric pushed down. Then I'll do the exact same thing on the other side. And you just want to make sure that you keep your fabric pulled very tightly. Don't worry if some of your pleats come up because you can hot glue those down later. Once I have all of the fabric tucked down inside of the carved section, I'm using one of Dollar Tree's wood stems, and I'm going to hot glue that right into the center. That's going to hold all those pushed pieces of fabric down. Then I can go back, and if any of my pleats are standing up, I can hot glue those down and push them down flat. To add an additional decorative element, I'm going to use some burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree. This came in a 3-pack of different styles, but you would definitely get a better deal if you buy it on a roll, because I did have to use 2 packs so I could use the same ribbon all the way around. So I'm going to hot glue one part to the front there in front of the stem, add a dot of hot glue on the bottom, and then I'll pull it tight and wrap it around until I get to the other side of the stem, and then I can hot glue that down. Once I cut that off, I can repeat this process, moving the ribbon over just a little bit. So I'm going to end up using 3 strands of ribbon, and this is going to create 6 separate sections on the pumpkin by just wrapping it around and meeting it on the other side of the stem where you started from. This also is going to help hold down some of those pleats as well. So once you're finished with your 3rd piece of ribbon, it should look something like this. I created another messy bow with some jute twine to add to the stem, and I'm also going to use some leaves off of another Dollar Tree pick and hot glue those down and then place my bow right in the center. Then you can trim your tails off to as short as you like or leave them long. I left mine long in this case. And I'm also using some stems off of a Dollar Tree pick that I've already used the flowers on. I'm going to cut those down with my wire cutters and then using the handle of a paintbrush, wrap those around to create the tendrils for the pumpkin. So then you can just slide your paintbrush out and use the longer piece there on the end to push down into the styrofoam right next to the stem. And I'll create another one to place right behind that. And now our pumpkin is complete. I love how this one turned out. I think it is absolutely beautiful with that burlap ribbon and those gorgeous sunflowers. But I would love to know what you guys think. Our next project, we are using another small styrofoam pumpkin from Dollar Tree and remove the embellishments from the top. This one I gave 2 coats of white chalk paint, and I am going to embellish this with some of these beautiful window clings from Dollar Tree. Applying a thin layer of Mod Podge to one section, and then I'm going to choose the mushrooms to add to this one. Now these will not apply like the napkins will because they don't get down into the creases. You'll push them into the creases, but then you're going to have to take your scissors and make tiny little slits at the bottom and push that down with the Mod Podge on your brush, and then you'll have to repeat that at the top of the window cling as well, just to be able to get those to lay down in between the grooves of your pumpkin. So on this one, I applied a leaf on each side, and you could go all the way around the pumpkin with some beautiful designs off of these window cling set, but I thought that I liked it just the way it was with just those simple 3 window clings. I'm going to add a stem at the top and then add some more wire tendrils to this one. You could also use gloss Mod Podge to go around this entire pumpkin, and it would look like a gorgeous porcelain piece. This was such an easy and simple project, but I love the way it turned out. It's absolutely beautiful with those pops of colors on this white pumpkin. If you're enjoying today's video and you haven't done so already, I would love for you to click that subscribe button right below this video and become a part of our community here at Country Lily DIY Decor. Also, if you'd like to visit me on my other social media accounts, all those links are in my description box below. Now let's get started on project number 4. We are using another small pumpkin from Dollar Tree and give it a base coat of white chalk paint. For this particular project, I'm going to take my utility knife and carve out a very small hole at the top and then dig some of that out so you'll have a little bit of a hole at the top. We're using one of Dollar Tree's Hula skirts, and I'm going to use 3 sections of the hula skirt at a time. So each section has about 3 strands in it, 3 or 4 strands. I'm going to tape those down and then just make a simple braid until I have all of those strands braided. And at the end, I will use a piece of Scotch tape to tape around the end to keep it from unraveling. Then if there's any little excess pieces at the bottom, I can cut those off. I'm also going to pull up that top piece that we taped down and use the Scotch tape to tape around that. It should look something like this. You want to have enough of it so that it will be able to wrap around from the carved portion at the pumpkin all the way around until you get to the other side. Depending on the part of the hula skirt that you're using, some of them are going to be longer than others. So I created 6 of those braids, and then I'm going to hot glue one end and then tuck it down into the carved portion and then wrap it around until I get to the other side. Now, if you have a little excess over when you get to the other side, just wrap a piece of Scotch tape around that to hold those in place so they don't unravel. And then you can cut the section right in the middle of the Scotch tape, so the end of that one will be taped and the beginning of the next one will be taped. And in some of these instances, the piece that I cut off was long enough to go around the pumpkin again. So I'm just going to hot glue that in and tuck any little excess down into the carved portion. And I'm going to continue to do this going from the very next section to cover up this entire pumpkin. So you'll just hot glue that down and then kind of wrap it around next to your first part that you put on there, and then hot glue it, and just continue to do that until you have all of your braids on there and your pumpkin is covered. If you have a few little gaps later on, you can always go in and add little small sections to cover those gaps up. Once you have those wrapped, don't worry about if you can see a little bit of the pumpkin underneath. We're going to fix that. Using some jute rope, I'm going to hot glue that down right there at the end. I'm going to wrap this around the pumpkin twice, so you want to make sure your hot glue sets before you wrap it. Wrap it around that section twice, and then holding my finger on top where we carved that opening, I'm just going to go over to the side where the indentions of the pumpkin are, wrap it twice, and continue to do this around each of those indentions until they are all covered with the jute rope, 2 strands of it. Then holding that in place with my finger at the top, I'm going to push those down, and I'm just using that little spatula thing that I use with my hot glue. And then I'm going to take a wood stem from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to hot glue that down right directly into the carved portion. Once the glue on the stem has set, I'm going to take that jute rope and wrap it around a few times and then hot glue that down and cut the excess off. Then I can go back and spread out the hula skirt in between those sections to kind of fill it in between each one of the jute ropes. And then if you have, like in my instance, once I spread everything out, I had this small section there. You can just hot glue another braid and tuck it down and blend it in really nicely. To embellish the top, I started off by using 3 leaf section off of another Dollar Tree pick, hot glued that down, and then I'm going to use some of the berries that came off of the original pumpkin and just cut a cluster of those down and glue it in the center. And then I decided the 3 leaves were a little too much. You couldn't really see the stem, so I cut that back leaf off. And now this project is finished, and I love how this little pumpkin turned out. I love the texture of the hula skirt with that jute twine. I think it just turned out simply beautiful, but I'd love to know what you guys think. For our final pumpkin makeover, we're using one of Dollar Tree's larger carvable pumpkins. I'm going to cut about a 2-inch hole at the top And for this project, I'm using some of this gorgeous orange yarn that I found at Dollar Tree. Now, it is a different colored orange than the pumpkin, so I want to tone some of the brightness down on that pumpkin. I'm going to give it one coat of acrylic paint in the color pumpkin orange, because you will be able to see some of this color when the project is finished. Using some burlap ribbon, I'm going to hot glue that down and then tuck it down into the carved section, but you could just glue it right there at the top. And then I'm going to wrap that around, hot glue that section down. Then I'll go to the opposite side and do the exact same thing. So I'll have 2 strands of ribbon on there, and you're just pushing that down, making sure that those are hot glued securely right there at the carved portion of the pumpkin. Then I'm going to take that same burlap ribbon and go in between each of those ribbons. And you're going to be able to see some of the orange of the pumpkin come through this burlap, which is just gorgeous. So once I get those sections glued down, I have another burlap ribbon that is just a hint darker than this burlap. I think this burlap here came from maybe Dollar General. I'm going to use that to go over the pumpkin in about 2 strands of ribbon, so in opposite sections. It's going to give it a variation of color, and then it's going to make it look like, the bottom portion has this light burlap that the orange is peeking through, and then the top portion has this darker burlap brown. I think it just creates some beautiful dimension in it. So when I'm finished, it looks something like this, and it's just gorgeous with that orange peeking through. Now I'm going to take my yarn and I'm going to cut about a 24 to 25 inch strip down, and I'm going to cut 9 of these. Then I'm going to tie the end of those 9 pieces together with another piece of yarn, and then I'm going to tape this down just like we did with the hula skirt, and I'm going to braid it using 3 sections at a time. So you'll have 3 strands of yarn in each section of your braid, and then braid it all the way down to the end. And then when I get to the end of that, I'm going to tie it with another piece of yarn just like I did at the top. And then if there's any little excess strands at the bottom, I'll cut those off. I created 4 braids, and just like we did with the ribbon, I'm going to hot glue these down. I'm going to hot glue them starting off by going in between the sections of the 2 darker burlap ribbon, and then hot glue the other end down. And then I'll go to the opposite side and glue that one down, and we're going to create sections, which is going to end up being like 6 sections on our pumpkin. And this gorgeous orange yarn is just going to give it that beautiful pop of color. Once I get that last piece tucked in there, I'm going to take another wood stem from Dollar Tree. You can buy these in a bag. I'm going to hot glue that down right into our carved portion, and then just wrap some jute twine around the stem a couple of times and create a very simple bow. And I can just trim the tails down to whatever length that I want for the bow to be. And our pumpkin is finished. I love how this one turned out. I love those pops of orange. It is just beautiful. So if you have a favorite out of today's video, let me know in the comments section down below. I always love to know which one is your favorite. I hope you enjoyed today's video and found tons of inspiration. If so, make sure to hit that like button. It really does help my channel to grow. And if you haven't done so already, please make sure to click that subscribe button right below this video. Please take care, you guys, and I'll see you next time.